Hey everyone, I am Mary Beth McAndrews from Dread Central, and I am here today with Alison Star Locke, director of the film The Apology. Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I'm very excited to talk to you about this movie that took me on a very intense emotional journey, so close to the holidays. So my first question for you, very basic, where did the idea for The Apology come from for you?
Yes, so I am a big horror nerd and a big true crime nerd. So I've always been reading about these stories and watching about these stories. And so I had a dream one night where luckily I keep a pad or at least my phone by the bed so I can write these things down when this happens. Where it was the middle of the night. There was a knock on my front door. There was a man on the other side of the door. Obviously, for most women, especially, I think the idea of a knock on the door in the middle of the night is terrifying, right?
Yeah.
So I in the dream, I went to the front door and there was a man on the other side and he said, "I know what happened to your daughter. I'm here to talk to you about that." And then then the story for me kind of came off of that moment. So that for me was the big central moment. So actually when we were
Oh,
filming
wow.
it, I was like crying because I was just like, my dream is literal, I'm like, my literal dream is actually real right now.
That's
So
so
that's
wild.
yeah, so it was really wild that it came from that place, and then as I was writing it, of course, things evolved. What is the relationship between these two people, and what does it mean to me? And I was realizing as I was writing it that it became very personal very quickly, and that it became a
Mm,
metaphor for. Luckily, I do not have this experience of being a searching parent, and I do not have like home invasion in my life, but but that's art for you, right? You find a thing of connection. So I realized that it was I'd been staying home with my daughter for years. She's autistic, and being her advocate, taking her to therapies, always kind of fighting with everybody to be like, you need to see her, you need to see her as a full person and give her a chance. And I just felt connected to searching parents in that way too, where it's like, can we please stop acting like these missing girls are disposable? They're not disposable. These are people.
yeah.
We should care about them. We should care about what happened to them. We should care about why this keeps happening to them. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of a big driving force. And also trying to come at the character of Jack of like, how much compassion can we give? Like, let's see how much change is possible. Let's think about why this sort of thing keeps happening. Why do men feel like, uh, that great saying where it's like men are afraid women are laugh at them and women are afraid that men will kill them. It's like, why
Oh,
is
yeah.
this so? Your image of yourself is more important than someone's safety.
Life. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I'm glad you mentioned true crime because I was gonna say, like, this movie really does have that like reality of true crime. Like you see the documentary, you see like the edited kind of interviews, but this is the reality of what someone's life is like when you're not watching the true crime. Like your documentary, you're seeing her sitting by herself and trying not to drink and going through all of this. So I wanted to hear more about that and kind of how it does in this world where we love true crime, making the apology feels like kind of a good no foil is the right word, but a comparison of like this is what people might be dealing with behind closed doors after we watch the sensationalized 1 hour special.
Oh, absolutely. Well, because I always thought about that. There's a line in the film, something to the effect of, I want them to know that she's not just a face on a poster.
Yeah.
Like I always thought, what is it like to live with that every day? And then I realized, a lot of people in my life will say things like, I don't know what it's like to be you, to be there for your kid, like in this world that's not accommodating. And again, not the same thing, but it's just that connection
Yeah.
piece. And I think that was what was interesting to me, was about taking, I really, in all everything I write, I really love the idea of taking something that is sort of a big idea, something
Yeah.
that we see as something sort of big, like what it would be like for your kid to be missing and somebody shows up and tries to tell you about it, and ground that into things that I can relate to, like, the tragedy of gender expectations, like
Yeah.
how that can, be so destructive, things like that. And also just like best girlfriends, like we need more best girlfriends in movies. Like it was so exciting to me to put Anna and Janine together. I was like, they were like a dream team of female friendship on screen, so yeah, I don't know if I strayed too far from your question.
No, but I also think that like a lot of the time in movies like this, it's like kind of the friends are teaming up to fight. And they have that a little bit here, but I also think there's something really interesting here about bearing witness with Janine Garofalo's character. Like not
Thank you. That's
necessarily.
exactly what I wanted that to
Oh,
be
really?
like. Yes.
Really? Yeah, because
Yes.
like she's not necessarily engaging in any violence, but she's there to be support and to listen and to be there. And I think again, like you're saying, we don't have a lot of that kind of bearing witness and the importance of that. It doesn't need to always be like active violence, but there is like something so important about bearing witness to trauma. And I just thought about that a lot with her character. And I'm glad you brought that up because again, like her
Yeah.
character, I think is an important kind of little puzzle piece that goes into this movie.
I said to Janine, I said, you're the surrogate for the audience. You're all of us
Yeah.
women who have sat there. I'm a unicorn among my female friends that I've never been assaulted. I've never had all of those experiences, but I've bear witness over and over and over again, as we all have, and I
Yeah.
wanted to represent that in the film.
Yeah.
And also to start to remind her, like, you do have beauty and love in your life. You have
Yeah.
had a big, terrible loss, but there is still this beautiful power in your life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so pivoting to the setting, Christmas, why did you pick Christmas specifically for the apology? It seems like obviously you might like Christmas. So like it's the significance
What
of
do you mean?
just
I also,
Christmas.
I also love a theme. I love to dress to a theme. So I'm like,
Hell
oh, I'm
yeah.
gonna
Oh
be
yeah.
talking about my Christmas movie. Let's do it.
It's great.
Yeah, I'm a big nerd that way. But I really, in the dream, I had this sense that it was happening at Christmas. And then I was like, am I
Okay.
gonna keep it? And I was like, absolutely, because it's it's one of my favorite times of the year. It's always like Christmas and Halloween. I'm such a big horror nerd. I'm like, oh, it's right neck and neck.
Yep.
But it's also just like there's such a great tradition of Christmas films, and I'm such a big fan of them, especially the darker stuff like the Die Hards and the In Bruges and Gremlins, all of these great, Inside, which is a new favorite I
Oh,
just saw like a year ago.
oh my God, best Christmas movie. Most horrendous, but like incredible Christmas movie.
Yeah. Oh, a woman after my own heart. Yes. So, I mean, I'm not
Maybe
surprised
literally.
because, yeah, right. There you go. Nice job. That was a good connection. Yeah. So, so then I was like, well, what a wonderful like opportunity to think, especially because it's about these people sort of reconciling their past together.
Yeah.
And it is sort of, so that's why I put the line in about Dickensian. He is a ghost of Christmas past that's come to deal with things with her. And I just thought it's just so much more cinematic. I liked the idea of it being sort of an unofficial fairy tale, an unofficial haunted house story. It's like we're not super obvious about it, but there were a lot of choices that I made, that all of us on the team made, to sort of let it be a little bit like Darlene's bedroom. We shoot it in this very theatrical sort of Night of the Hunter way, where it's like it's intentional to give you hints that, hey, we are aware that this is an extreme situation that would not normally happen, and we're going to see what these two characters do together, what their needs are, at the end of the day.
Yeah, what was it like directing Anna Gunn and Linus Roche together? I mean, it's really just the two of them this whole movie, and they're like they are turned up, and like both of them I've seen before, and they know they can do it. But it's like watching a stage play and watching the two of them like like verbally and then physically later kind of spar with each other. So what was that like working with these two actors and having in such a small space and creating such explosive emotions?
Oh, it was such a thrill. It was such a thrill because my favorite thing ever is a good conversation, and the idea that these two characters are going to have this conversation that's almost violence in its own way.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun because from the first conversations that I had with Anna and Linus separately, and then when we started to work together, it was all over Zoom at first.
Yeah.
And talking about what we wanted what we were trying to say with the film, what we were trying to explore, and then always trying to I was always trying to be very rigorous about walking the line of tone between very realistic and relatable, and still sort of, again, a little bit of this fairy tale thing of them both being maybe a little more articulate than they would have been in real life, a little bit more verbose, that sort of thing, and trying to get that tone right. And they work a little bit differently in that way. Anna's a bit more instinctual, wants to be a little more fluid, And Linus is more of like, he's an Englishman who was trained in, you know, I forget, I'm a terrible friend that I forget which amazing acting school he went to, but he went to one of those amazing London acting schools. And so he's used to, you know, you do what's on the page, and trying to
Yeah.
kind of marry those two needs so that I could be there for them to do their best work so we can do this exploration was very challenging, but really rewarding. They were really, I mean, they're just such incredible performers, and they gave such brave performances in every sense of the word. Like right
Yeah.
down to the
Good
fight
Lord.
scenes and
I
everything.
know. Yeah. And so, okay, this is a horror movie. I'm glad you said home invasion earlier because it feels like a
Yeah.
really interesting inversion on the home invasion
Mhm.
movie. But what
Yeah.
do you think in your heart do you feel is the scariest home invasion movie that you have seen?
Oh, oh, that's such a good question. I think I think probably, I mean, I hate to go back to Inside, but I feel like that one, the sense, I really liked, no, I don't want to trash a movie while I'm also complimenting it. So I will say, yeah, I would say, well, you know, there's some movies where you're like, okay, it's not 100% successful, but this thing really got to me and I'm
Yeah,
so obsessed with it. I don't know if this would count. Would you count Last House on the Left as a home invasion?
I would.
Because yeah, that one is the scariest one to me. I actually did a whole
Okay.
thing. My husband does this podcast called The Hold Up, and it's all about memory, like going back to a film that affected you, see if it still affects you,
Wait, that's
right?
so funny. I do something very similar.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, it's
Oh
called
wow.
Scarred for Life. We interview people about the first film that like traumatized them as a kid.
Oh my God, that's funny because I actually did write something for Scarred for Life. So yeah, so I wrote
Talk more.
yeah. So it's so yeah, Last House on the Left. So I had watched just pieces of it in this documentary called American Nightmare, and they had just clips. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know, and I'm just watching this awful thing. But yeah, so I watched it again. So I watched the film trying to conquer my fear. It didn't work, totally terrified me. Then I went back and watched it again, and years later for this podcast, and realized like how much of an impact it had had on me, like as a person, as a filmmaker,
Oh.
everything, like all these fascinations. And I realized it was like, oh right, the uh so often the home invasion story is about how the family has been attacked or about how a man's castle has been invaded. And so I really wanted our film to feel like a female battleground, in that, you know, she has like purple couch, you know, and things like this, like these
Yeah.
things that are clearly a woman lives alone here, was sort of my mission statement for what the house was to look like. So yeah,
Oh.
so that's why I also love Inside, because it felt like, oh, she was even feeling fraught about having the baby in the first place, and then all of
Yep.
this is happening in her home. It all felt like such a ultimate violation,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah. And then my final question for you is, again, you're a horror nerd. What is the scariest film outside of what we just talked about that you have ever seen?
Oh, the very scariest. Oh, I like you. Let's see. My favorite scariest. Um, I don't know if it's the very scariest, but it's the one that fascinates me the most still, is The Shining. It just
Cool.
always does.
Yeah.
I always think about the way that movie is such an interesting sort of litmus test of the way people look at relationships and gender
Yes.
stuff, because I'm
Yes.
always out there going, justice for Wendy, man. She was making it work, like a trauma abuse victim, like getting her kid out of that situation. And it's just so genuinely scary, and so like it's also scary just even the conversation around that film. How often people will be like, man, Jack was fine before the ghost got to him. I'm like, was he?
Remember how he broke his kid's arm when he was drinking and he was mad at him? I
Remember
mean,
that?
whatever.
The long ash. I have like I wish I could remember the artist's name, but I have this incredible print that she'd made of Wendy with the long ash above my desk that I use whenever I'm writing, just thinking about Wendy, you know, she's such a central figure in my brain at all times.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, Allison, about the apology and about horror movies.
Thank
It was
you.
awesome.
It was such a treat. Thank you so much.